The farm is a little over 51 acres. We've got over 22 beds here, and in those beds you'll find various things from nut trees, which can be pecan, chestnut, hazelnut, various berries, whether it's golden raspberries, blackberries, black raspberries, fruit trees. We do various different fruit trees in different areas. In the gardens are all in beds. Most of those beds are hugelkultur beds. And here is we concentrate on soil and not having to water anything. We don't water at all. We don't water the tomato plants, the tomato starts. We pull back the mulch, stick the tomatoes in the ground, and we never water. We never water the tomatoes, the turmeric, the fruit trees, the whatever it is. We don't water. How we can get away with that is we've dug trenches here about 3 foot deep, and we've put trees in there where we've cleared property, cleared more pasture. We've taken those trees and we put them in the trenches, and then trees, shrubs, just any good wood material, because anytime you find dead wood buried in the ground, it just absorbs moisture. It absorbs moisture. So with that being buried under the ground, actually it's not buried yet, it's buried under the ground, we put more soil on top of it, and then we put tons of mulch. Mulch, I mean, it can be wood chips, leaves. We end up using hay just because it's readily available, and it's in the quantity that we use. It's easy to get in the big round bales. So then we roll hay out over top of that, and then we pull the hay back and then put like the tomato start into there. That dead wood buried under the ground, especially with it being on a slight slope like this, anytime that we get rain, if we get a huge rain, it ends up flowing across the ground, hits that raised bed, and all of the water ends up going into that trench, where then the dead wood in the ground ends up sucking that up. So then at first the plants, they make it, because of all of the mulch, it keeps the ground moist, but then once the roots get down a little bit further, they end up into all that dead wood. And the dead wood is just always moist, so it's able to just absorb the moisture in there. So therefore you don't have the fluctuations with no rain or a lot of rain. Like with the raised beds, we don't have problems with the tomatoes being too wet, because they're raised a little bit and their roots they're not sitting in water. It's not like a flooded area, so the raised beds really help out as far as things from rotting, or like the fruit trees don't have wet feet because they're up on mounds a little bit, but yet there's water just down below. As far as the water, as far as the rain and stuff, what we really try to do here is to slow it, spread it, sink it when it comes to water. We want to slow the water down, which is one of the main reasons that we do swales on contour. So if the ground's sloping away, we end up doing swales just to catch some of that water and slow it down. And then there's other areas where we end up having they're almost like dry ponds, just areas that are sunken, that we've dug, to where that water can during a heavy rain, it can end up flowing and filling that area up, and then it ends up absorbing into the ground. So we try to keep all of our water. We would prefer that our water doesn't run off from the property. We want to try to keep and hold our water, so then it goes down into our well. It fills our ground with water, not just run off. And when we bought this place, it was pretty barren. I mean, there wasn't a lot of vegetation. A lot of it had recently been cleared fairly recently, so it was just really eroding. And one of the key things that really helped things to grow was, this is just one of the key things, was the swales on contour, just to help slow that water and direct it to where we want it to go, which is in the ground. And then the other thing that we really did is incorporated cattle and a huge variety of seeds. On the property here, we have approximately, I think it's close to nine different ponds. 9 ponds, and we have them in, I think there's 7 different pastures that have a pond as a water source. That way, if there's ever a problem with our well or electricity or anything like that, we don't have to carry water for the cattle. So that way we can move the cattle into various pastures to where we don't have to water them. And then that also, what that does is that really helps the wildlife here. I mean, we've got more dragonflies here than what you could ever think of, and part of that is because of all the water features, because of all the ponds. On the farm we have 12 pastures, and 7 of those pastures have ponds in them. That way we don't have to carry water to the cattle everywhere. We do rotational grazing here, so we have the cattle come in, and the grass might be a foot tall, and then we graze it down to maybe 6 inches and then move them on. What that does is when the grass is about a foot tall, 18 inches tall, and you graze a third of it off, the roots end up dying back, and that ends up building soil. If you graze it down to 2 inches, the roots die back too much, and it takes too long for that grass to grow back. So it's actually, you end up with more feed, more grass, if you only graze it like a third and then move them on. Also, the top parts of the grass, that's the lush part. That's where most of the nutrition is. So if we allow our cattle to graze all the way down, there's not as much nutrition left. So we constantly rotate the cattle, rotate them from pasture to pasture. That way there's not as much, there won't be as much parasite load, there won't be as many flies, the grass is healthier, and it's not just grass. I mean, we plant chicory, kale, collards, daikon radishes, purple top turnips, plantain. We plant that stuff in the pastures because we truly believe that you are what you eat. So if your cattle are eating one type of old burnout grass, that's what you're eating. So we plant, actually we go out and we pick a lot of the stuff in the pastures for our salad. But the stuff that we don't eat, the cattle end up eating. And that's what really keeps those cattle healthy, is eating those different things and moving. That variety, just like us, we want variety when we eat. So we want the cattle to have variety in the pastures. Farm, we don't use herbicides, pesticides, fungicides. We don't no fertilizers whatsoever. No bought and fertilizers. We think it's real important not to use that stuff. With the cattle, we don't use wormers, we don't use fly sprays, we don't use any of that. And we have more dung beetles here, and because of that, I mean, when you pour that stuff on your cattle, that's going into their dung, and then the dung beetles, it's killing them. So it's killing the earthworms, killing dung beetles. So we don't do that stuff here. So yeah, the beauty of not using those chemicals in the sides, any of the sides, is that it's not getting into the ground. It's not killing the earthworms. It's not getting in our groundwater. It's not killing the mycelium in the orchard. It's not killing anything like that. I believe that things are thriving here because of not using any of the chemicals, any of the sides. And the cattle are proof. I mean, there's been several farms that I've been on, in the cow patties, you can see them, and they're void of life. I know it sounds crazy, but you kick them, and there's no bugs living in them. There's no bugs living in them because they're feeding the cattle wormers, fly sprays, and all that. So anything that goes to eat that cow patty ends up dying. Well, that's not helping the soil. What we want here is we want living soil. We have most of our livestock is under the ground. That's our largest That's our largest portion of our livestock, is the ones that we can't even see, and they're just thriving there for us. They're the ones that are building this place. So if we can accommodate them by mulch, by manure, by a variety of plants. There's the microbes in the soil. They want diversity. So when we spread 30 different varieties of seeds into the pastures, the microbes in the soil, they're happier. The bugs are happier because each one eats a different thing, and they are what are building the soil. They are what's making this place thrive instead of just survive. On the beds, or in the beds, one of the things that we don't do here is plant apple tree, apple tree, apple tree, apple tree. That we don't want that, because we don't want the pests that are on this apple tree just mosey on over to the next apple tree. So what we do here is we plant apple tree, pear tree, peach tree, cherry tree, and we alternate them. That way, when one pest goes to one tree, it can't just walk over to the next one. That diversity, I think, is key. In also in areas, it'll be a pecan tree, a hazelnut tree, and a raspberry bush. So we really try to concentrate in like the gills, like having comfrey coming up underneath some of the fruit trees, having grapevines growing on some of the fruit trees. Just trying to keep it as natural as possible. Trying to keep it the way God designed it, to where things are growing together, not in a monoculture. Springtime is normally when we get a lot of rain, and every few years we get a drought, and we've found that our place just shines during a drought compared to our friends. Our friends are watering, their tomato plants are looking bad, their fruit trees are looking bad, and we don't have that as much because we're slowing, spreading, sinking that water. We are putting that water into our reservoir, into our underground reservoir. That's what's keeping the microbes happy, staying moist, which then they're making more air pockets in the soil from their traveling up and down, so then we get more water infiltration. Because of keeping them moist to start with, then they help put more water in the soil by all the earthworm holes, by the deep-rooted, the tap-rooted plants that we planted, as far as the daikon radishes, the chicory, the dandelion, all of those. There's areas where we've allowed pine trees to grow and maybe get like 4 foot tall, and then we cut them down. Well, all of those roots in the ground, those end up decomposing in forming little channels for the water to get down to our water, to our groundwater. 5-acre wetland on the property that fluctuates seasonally, but in that there's also a pond that's stocked with fish. It's spring fed, but it also catches a lot of runoff. But there's times when it's very deep and times that it fluctuates and it goes down.